Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. My name is Janice Malillo, your host, and of course, we are currently also simulcasting through the Wisdom audio app. So thank you to our current listeners on Wisdom who are hopping on. You know, sometimes in the grand scheme of life, when things happen, we tend to deviate in a different direction. And sometimes, often more than that direction can be such an amazing and inspiring place to be. I am so excited to welcome back to the Stories podcast, specifically, obviously, the author series, Sam Perez. Welcome back, Sam.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be back here.
And I am so excited to have you back. You were first a guest back on October 15th, so about 5 months or so ago. And you, of course, work full-time as a television reporter. God bless you. That's got to be such a tough job these days. And of course, that is a subject for another time. But you are also the author of Deviate From Denial, erasing the stigma of addiction and recovery through inspirational stories. So if you could briefly describe for our audience, because I think this is so important for them to know, how did you come about to write that book?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a journalist. So when I was in college studying journalism, I was also helping out with my parents' business in Lexington, Kentucky. So they own a restaurant called Deviate Kitchen, and it's an all-day breakfast sandwich and bakery that serves people in the Lexington community, and everyone that works there is a second chance employee, meaning that they're in recovery from addiction. So I love stories. I love telling stories. And I think that with the opioid epidemic and all the effects that it has on our nation and on our world, I think that it's so important that we talk about addiction and we erase the stigma surrounding it. And I think that just having a conversation is a good way to do that. So I figured, why not put my love for storytelling to use and try and raise a little bit of awareness of, to the issue and what people are experiencing and what my parents are doing. So I set out to write a book, and here we are.
And I think that is so amazing because, you hit on quite a few things, what you said there, and especially the awareness going, and especially, of course, a lot in the news right now is, the opioid addiction, especially in reference to fentanyl. And I know, well, I shouldn't say I know, but I would think as, of course, a journalist, but also, working very closely with your parents in the Deviate Kitchen, that, as you mentioned, second chance employees, like that is pretty significant because we all believe that everyone deserves a second chance.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I agree. I think everyone in their mind believes that everyone deserves a second chance. And I think that sounds like a great concept to everyone. But what I really admire about my parents is the fact that they're actually doing it. And I think that, even we talk about being a journalist and reporting on, fentanyl, and overdoses are huge. And I think it's so easy to see those as statistics. Like you hear in 2021, over 100,000 people died of an opioid overdose. And that's crazy. But I feel like it's so easy to hear that number and kind of take out the human aspect. And so working with my parents, I've been able to see real people, real lives that put a face and a name to those statistics. And I think a lot of people kind of might not think of that. And I get it. I think it's really easy to just think of that as a number. And then also, I think one thing that's kind of talked about is recidivism rates, and which basically is when people are incarcerated, they're put in jail or prison, and then they get out. We as a society want them to be productive members of society, right? We hope that when they go to jail or they go to prison, that they're being reformed and then they re-enter and they're in the workforce and they're contributing in a positive way. But if we don't give them that second chance, how are they supposed to do that? How are they supposed to redirect their lives and do anything other than return to the way they were before if no one takes that chance on them, if they don't have an opportunity for employment? So I think it's up to people in a position where they might own a business or be in a position where they can hire people to really extend that second chance that we all seem to really want for people.
And that's very significant as well, because you had mentioned that you admire your parents. Like we say, obviously everyone deserves a second chance, but your parents are living proof that given the chance for these employees, and as you refer to as second chance employees, that really can be so inspiring on so many. Every employee that works with your parents has a story behind their story.
Absolutely. And it's a story that is so inspiring, and I think teaches my parents and me and everyone who works with them. I mean, there's just so much to learn from these people. And one thing that we realized, and we've just seen Deviate kind of be a testament to, and I think people are wary when they hear second chance employees, because I think they equate that with second rate. And what we have seen time and time and time again is that that is simply not the case. Second chance employees are just as capable of excellence as you and as me and as anyone. And we have so many people that we've had the privilege of working alongside of who have had really successful careers as nurses, as college professors, I mean, as teachers, as all these different careers, and they just, stumbled along the way and had some problems with addiction. And now they're at a new chapter in their life. They're trying to redirect their lives, and they are so important, and they have so much to add to society and that we can learn from. But then you also have people who maybe were born into addiction, never knew anything other than a life of drugs and alcohol, yet they have overcome that and they've gotten this second chance. And then same thing, they're just as capable of excellence. And I just think that seeing these people and their journey and where they are now is so inspiring to pretty much anyone who meets them. I mean, it really is incredible.
Oh my gosh. And, as you were saying that, I'm thinking that from a journalistic standpoint, and of course, again, working with your parents, addiction does not discriminate.
Absolutely. That is one of, I think, the biggest themes of my book, is that really in this world that we're living in, where the opioid epidemic is running rampant, no one is immune from this. Addiction affects everyone. And so that is everyone, no matter your gender, no matter your age, your race, your social class, it does not matter. And I think that's really, really important for us to realize, first of all, so we're cognizant of the fact of like safety. Like, I am susceptible to addiction in the same way you are, in the same way anyone who's listening is. And I think that's important to know just for your own safety and protection. But then also, I think it adds a little bit of a sympathetic factor when we start to realize that it's not an us versus them issue. It is not us, the people who are clean and sober or able to enjoy a beer and, that be it. It's not us versus those junkies or those addicts over them. It's literally all of us. We're all on the same playing field, and no one is immune, because addiction doesn't discriminate.
It certainly does not. I want to kind of go back to some of your employees, because I feel that I am not doing your story justice if we don't at least talk about some of these amazing stories. And as I'm saying this, obviously we're on Zoom, and I can see your face, and you are just beaming. So let's talk about some of these stories and how they have affected you. Like, I'm sure we're going to be talking about a couple of different stories, but what is a story that sticks out to you? Like from the start of maybe one of the employees starting to work there to where they are today.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest stories that kind of stands out to me is Tara. So she is, I think, one of perhaps the most pivotal people in my family's life, because she is how we really understood addiction and how it can affect people, and how I think my family started to understand that idea of it's not us versus them. My parents met Tara. She was a server at a restaurant, and she was phenomenal. She was like if you go and you have the best meal of your life with the best service ever, like that's her. Like she was just incredible. And so my parents had a restaurant before Deviate, and they were looking for employees, kind of this chance encounter. They ran into her, and she said she was not working at the restaurant they'd met her at, but she was looking for a job. And so they hired her on the spot. And she, for months, worked at my parents' restaurant, and she was like a rock star, just did everything right, was truly like a gifted customer service person. And one day my mom went into the bathroom at work and she was cleaning, and under the sink, she found a ramekin and a spoon. And she didn't think anything of it, so she threw it away. And then the next day she went back, and again, there was a ramekin and a spoon. And this was back in, years ago. And so the opioid epidemic and drug addiction wasn't talked about in the news the same way it is now. And so she Googled it, like, what does this mean? And she found out that can be used to heat up drugs and then inject them intravenously. So they called in the police, they interrogated all the employees, and they couldn't figure out who it was. No one fessed up to it. Well, kind of later down the line, they ended up realizing that it was Tara. And that was like the biggest shock to my parents, to me, to my younger brother. Like no one saw that coming. And so we ended up finding out that she was actively using heroin. She was a single mother. She had a 2-year-old at home, and we were just floored. Like that was so not what we expected. So she ended up going into treatment and trying to be sober. And along the way, my family, we'd really befriended her. Like she is just an amazing woman. And so we kind of helped support her along the way. My parents really worked with her to manage her money, even make sure she was paying her rent. And we would hang out with her. We took her to church with us. We went and ate dinner with her a lot, and really just kind of continued to pour into this friendship. And we watched her as she relapsed more than once. And I think just watching her struggle was something that was so pivotal in my life, because I was young, and just seeing her, I think, really solidified that idea of addiction is this huge problem. It's this disease. It's not as simple as wanting to stop and then just quitting. It's also not as simple as loving someone so much that you can convince them to stop. Like we loved on Tara so much, and her little boy loved on her, and her family loved on her, but she was just grappling with this really hard problem. And so watching that, I think, taught a lot of lessons to all of us involved. And now, years later, could not be more proud to say that we are still in touch with Tara. She is sober. She is doing so well, and just completely has redirected her life. And now she's even working for a treatment facility that ultimately helped her in her journey towards sobriety. And she's being able to pour into other people that are on that journey as well.
Wow. I'm getting the chills thinking about that, because what if, I'm thinking about the what ifs, like you're saying, you and your family loved on her. Her family loved on her. If she didn't have that support, and you'd mentioned that, you also saw the trauma of her relapsing more than once, and that must have been so hard on everybody, but yet you still loved upon her. And at some point, I feel that she saw that.
Absolutely. And I think that just from talking to people who have been through addiction and come out the other side, so to speak, like, I think that is something that everyone sees. And loving someone through their journey with addiction is so hard. And I have only experienced a small glimmer of that. Like I have talked to people who have watched their children struggle or their parents struggle. And that is something that is just so heartbreaking to think of, because you obviously never want that for anyone that you love. And it can be so hard to, watch that. But I think it's reassuring to know that the person that's struggling is cognizant of that, even if in the moment they're, not listening or maybe not receptive. Just knowing and talking to people who have, again, come out kind of the other side and said, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but looking back, like, I know you were there. I know that I was loved, and now I'm able to feel that and understand, but I just wasn't in a place where I could receive that before. So I think that gives a little bit of faith for people that are maybe in the throes of an addiction with a loved one, and just kind of knowing that maybe one day that'll be recognized, but it can be really hard when it's not in the moment.
Well, sure, because I think, of course, and we see these different shows where, um, whether it's Dr. Phil or whatever TV show it is, where they have these crisis, I want to call them interventions. And I watched a few in them, and I think to myself, oh my God, that could be someone that I love, and some of these people that do have the drug addiction or alcohol addiction, whatever it may be, it's really very sad to see them in that place. It's very sad and emotional to see their family, friends, and other loved ones perhaps in that place.
Absolutely. And I think kind of the common wisdom among people in the recovery community is that when you are in an active addiction, you are not yourself. So watching a family member or a loved one go through it, like they literally are not themselves. They're not acting like themselves. They're not making the same decisions they would if they were sober. And that's something that I really explored with Jade in my book. Is her and her husband struggled with addiction. They were in and out, relapsing, and in and out of recovery for years. And she talked about that as a spouse when she was sober, but she watched her husband relapse, just seeing him make decisions that he never would if he were sober, and just acting in a way that he never would. And, she talked a lot about this man that she had fallen in love with and had a marriage with for years, and just watching the way he was acting and how their relationship transformed. It was totally different than when they were sober. So I do think that's that aspect also of, it's almost like a completely different person when someone's in active addiction. And so I think that is a way that I've seen families be able to kind of, because it can be hard to love. I mean, as we talked about, it can be so hard to love someone through active addiction, but I think maybe framing it in that way of like, this is not the same person, is a way that some families cope. But I think it's very true.
Because it sounds obviously that there's a lot of emotional trauma for the family member, a loved one, really watching this before their eyes.
Yeah. And that's something that I also talked about in another chapter of my book, where I talked to two parents who they watched their son go through addiction, and their story, though, and what we talked about was not about their son's journey. He is in sobriety and he's doing well, but it was really about their journey, because as parents, they had their own grieving process. They had to struggle. They had to learn. They had to overcome obstacles, because when you love someone and you walk with them through addiction, you start to take on characteristics that the addict has. So, for example, like, a lot of times addicts, go towards isolation. They hide and they are ashamed and they don't want to tell anyone what's going on. Well, Tony and Tina, the parents in this instance, they did that too. And they talked about how hard it was when they would go to dinner with their friends who were parents, and their friends would talk about their kids going off to college or doing so well on something, but they didn't have that. And so they would just isolate and they would hide. And so it wasn't until Tony and Tina started working on themselves and started trying to unpack what they were going through and kind of heal themselves, that ultimately they started to get better. And then they watched as their son also got better alongside of them. So I do think it's important to realize that, addiction affects not just the person struggling, but everyone in their circle.
Right. And, what a process for them to go through. They're witnessing their son go through this. They're going through it as a parent. And that's just got to be so overwhelming. I just can't even fathom that.
Yeah, I really can't either. And it just is, makes me feel so grateful for the people who shared their stories with me to put them in a book. Like, people were talking to me about the worst parts of their lives, their lowest lows, and just trusting me to be able to share their story and relay that accurately is the biggest honor. And I am so thankful that everyone I talked to was just so candid and so willing to share in hopes that their experiences might help someone else.
And that's really what it's all about, because it goes back to, it's not an us versus them, but it's collaboratively coming together to support, love, grieve, whatever that process may be.
Absolutely. And that might look different for each different person, but I think the important thing, just the kind of common general factor that we need to be doing is at least just talking about it, just having a conversation, trying to understand it, trying to understand how we feel about it. A lot of people are get very kind of squeamish or uncomfortable talking about addiction. And I get it. It is not a fun topic to discuss. Like, it is hard. It is not pleasant. And it seems very just doom and gloom when you think about this big problem that we have on our hands, but avoiding it and sweeping it under the rug is not helping. That's what we've done for years and years. And so I think the biggest step that we can all take is simply to have a conversation. And it doesn't need to be this crazy philosophical thing where we solve all the problems ever under the sun. But I do think it's just, understanding like, hey, I feel uncomfortable talking about this. Why could that be? Or I feel like I have this judgment of, oh, it's just them over there. Or I think that addiction is a choice and that's how I feel. And I want to understand why I feel that way and maybe get some pushback or whatever it may be. I think we all have little preconceived notions or judgments or questions that simply would benefit from just talking about it.
And of course, I've seen in the news a lot lately, it's spring break time. And I caught a glimpse of something the other night. I don't remember what news channel it was, but I thought to myself, oh my gosh, how do you prepare your adult child who's going on spring break? How do you prepare yourself as a parent? And it just seems so overwhelming, just how to have that conversation with them.
It
And
is.
one of them had mentioned, the reporter mentioned something about making sure that you have, I think it's called Narcan.
Yeah.
Making sure you have that on hand, a couple different items that they were saying. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, that is so crazy, but so needed.
It is so needed. And it is crazy that that's kind of the world we're living in, but literally it is. And I think that a big part of that is the COVID-19 pandemic and how that changed supply of drugs. I think that's a reason that fentanyl is getting mixed in more and more. And I talked to someone who gave me such an interesting perspective. She's a peer support specialist. So what she does, she has it's basically a line that you can call if you're using drugs and you want to make sure that you don't accidentally overdose. So you call this number and someone listens to you as you take the drugs and they monitor your breathing to make sure that if your breathing changes and it sounds like you're overdosing, they can send emergency medical services straight to you. And so she's talking to me. She's like, people call this number because they're using drugs and they want to be safe. They are not calling this as a final goodbye. They are not trying to die. And so there's, I think, an interesting stigma when we think of overdosing, because what she was saying, and I thought she just put it so well, is if I'm supposed to take 20 milligrams and I take 50 milligrams, I overtook my dose. I overdosed. If I go to the street corner and I buy heroin and I think it's heroin and I mean to use heroin and that's my intention, but then there's fentanyl mixed in and I didn't know, then that's not really overdosing. I mean, it is, and that's what we call it, but it really is getting poisoned. Like, it really is like these people might be using drugs, and that is obviously destructive, and everyone knows that's a risk. However, there a lot of times nowadays, they're not trying to die. They're not trying to overdose. They're literally being poisoned, and there's something mixed into their drugs that's making it so much more potent than they ever realized. And same thing with kids on spring break. They might just be, trying to have a good time, but now, and obviously that's a risk and, not great, not something I'm condoning, but it is just crazy that there are so many overdose deaths right now. And a lot of them are so unintentional. People are not meaning to do that, but they're literally being poisoned.
That Sam, that is beyond frightening. Beyond frightening.
It is. It is. And it does seem very dismal. And like I said earlier, very doom and gloom. But I do think just by working together, understanding it, being aware of the dangers, being aware of the support that's out there is only going to help us at least start to work towards that, solution, because there is one and we can't keep going in this direction. It has to get better. And I think if we just all come together and start to even just put our heads together and brainstorm what might be the solution, then I think we're on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say are some other stories in relationship to the people in your book that shared some very intimate details of their stories, like really from, I don't want to say from the bottom of the barrel, but from the bottom of the barrel, and then they risen up to help others?
Yeah. I think two really stand out. I think all of them are so, intimate and so personal, but two that I haven't talked about that do really stand out to me is one, the story of Gene. So he was a Deviate employee, absolute just superstar, and struggled with addiction, as do all the employees, and unfortunately relapsed. And my family was incredibly close to him, and he did pass away from that overdose, which was super pivotal in my life, just because I had, like I said, with Tara, like I had watched her relapse, but she always came back. And my dad is an alcoholic, but he got sober before I was born, and he's doing well. And all these Deviate employees I had seen, but I had never really had someone close to me relapse and not make it through. And so that was just really marked moment kind of in, I feel like, my journey just with Deviate and with seeing everything. And I think for my parents and my brother as well. And so when I started to write the book, I knew I wanted to tie in his story some way and kind of honor him, because so many of the stories in my book they end on such a happy note, and they are so positive, and they show so much hope, and they're so inspiring. But I think that it would not be accurate to the problem if at least one story didn't reflect just the devastation. So I knew I wanted to honor him in some way. I knew I wanted to share his story to kind of show that. And so I called his mom, and speaking to his mom, who lost her child, it was chilling. Hearing her share her story, and from her perspective as a mother, losing her son to drug addiction, she was so vulnerable, and she shared in a way that was so admirable. And she wanted to share because she realized that she had lost her son, but that didn't mean other people had to lose theirs. So if she could do anything to help, then she wanted to. So talking to her, that was just really emotional, and really, I'm just so, thankful that she wanted to talk to me, because I totally would not blame her if she didn't. I can't imagine having to relive that, over and over. So I'm thankful for her for sharing that. And then also, I would say one story of Edson. He is a college professor who had a family. He is one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He's one of those people, when you're talking to him, you just are like, man, you have got it going on. What you're talking about. He is so quick-witted, just so intelligent and so engaging. And he struggled with addiction, starting, I think, in middle school, and just kind of continued throughout. He's sober now, and he worked at Deviate for a long time. And hearing him be really honest about his struggles with mental health, I think he's also someone who's just very blunt, very just will say, whatever he's feeling. And so listening to him relay his story and just kind of be super honest about how he literally did not want to be here anymore. He had a wife, he had a child, but he had this struggle with addiction that just felt so overwhelming. He felt so hopeless that he just didn't know what to do. And thankfully he ended up going into treatment. He's sober. He worked at Deviate. He's awesome. And now he's actually working in the prison system to educate inmates and help them redirect their lives from inside prison. And so, yeah, man, I could go on and on. There's so many amazing people with such cool stories, but yeah, those two were definitely, just really honest and really, really real.
And that is the beauty of the honesty, the rawness of someone's story, to share it in a way that so that others could understand, like, this person was, and you mentioned mental health. I want to make sure I put that in there. Along with the addiction comes the mental health aspect of it, which is in and of itself is debilitating.
Mhm.
And to work through that in such a way where he is today and now in the prison system, educating inmates, like that is I'm getting the tingles thinking about it. That is the testament and the beauty, really, of his story.
Oh my gosh, I know. And what's so crazy is, and that's just one person. And I mean, that's just what my family has seen time and time again. And I think that it's so hopeful to think, like, if other businesses started to implement second chance models and really give these people a second chance, like I said when we first started this conversation, like, they are capable of excellence. Like, he is out there literally changing people's lives every single day in the prison system, and then they might go on to do the same. And so just realizing that it's this domino effect, and that we have the chance to give these people the chance to, be so incredible and change other people's lives. Like, it really is just this trickle down effect. And I think it's just up to the first person who has that position of, where they have employees, and we all have different ways we can contribute to this, right? So my parents are business people and they have a business that they can employ people. So that's how they can help. But like me, I am a journalist, I'm a storyteller. And so I feel like the way I can help is by, starting the conversation and writing a book. So we all have different ways we can help. But I think when we start to utilize that, we can really empower these people who have redirected their lives to affect other people. And then it's just this, huge trickle down effect.
I love that. Where would you say the domino effect is upcoming for Deviate? In other words, your parents' establishment, as you mentioned, of course, the author of Deviate. Where do you see Deviate for you as far as a domino effect? Where is that going for you?
Yeah. So I think for Deviate, my parents are certainly wanting to help other people and other businesses implement a second chance model. So when they set out to do it, they knew that they wanted to have this concept where they helped people in active addiction, but they had no idea how to do that because it is hard. And I'm not going to say it's as simple as just hiring someone up off the street who says they want to be sober. Like, it's hard, it takes work, but they had to basically come up with this model, and they figured it out through trial and error. And so now that they feel like they have this pretty successful model, they want to help other people implement that in other businesses, because they don't want people to make the same mistakes they did. And they want it to be as easy as it can be. And so they have, before COVID, they were having workshops where they would basically invite people and walk them through the model start to finish, let them ask any question they wanted. And so I think their vision is expanding the mission of second chance employment, even if it's not through opening more Deviate locations. Now, maybe it can be, they have 2 right now. So maybe it is through opening different locations, but I think it's more so just spreading the second chance model and helping other business people implement that. And then when it comes to me, I think just supporting them, watching them, helping them in whatever way I can, and amplifying what they're doing. Again, through storytelling. Maybe it's another book one day. Maybe it's just helping with their social media and sending out newsletters for Deviate. But whatever it is, I certainly, they're my biggest inspirations. They're doing so much incredible work. So just however I can support that is what I see myself doing.
Wow, that is so beautiful. And by the way, I do see a second book in the works for you.
Well, thank you. We'll see one day.
Yeah, put that on your radar. I just want to segue over a moment and welcome everyone on the Wisdom Audio app. I see so many familiar names. Thank you so much for being here. I absolutely love Wisdom. Such amazing listeners and viewers. Thank you all so much. Sam, where do you have a couple more minutes, and maybe we can invite somebody up? Maybe they would like to contribute to the conversation or ask
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
that. Okay. So Wisdom, all my guests that are currently on, we have time for one listener to come up if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, or perhaps you have some very specific questions that you would like to ask Sam. We invite you to come up. Sam, as we're waiting for somebody to come up on stage, how can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on pretty much any social media platform. So that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's at Sam Perez News. So you can connect with me there. And then also my book is available pretty much wherever you buy books. So Amazon's probably going to be the easiest, also available on Barnes and Nobles. And then also in a couple weeks, it'll be coming out as an audiobook too. So that'll be available on Audible if you're interested.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. And I got to record it myself, which was a really cool opportunity.
I was going to ask you, I hope it would be in your voice, because that would be amazing.
Yes. So I just sent the final kind of edits. So, or the final re-record. So I just had to do a few little segments over, and then those edits should be done in the next couple weeks. So I'm looking forward to that coming out.
Wow, that is so amazing. Sam, I think your domino effect is just starting.
Yeah, I hope so, because I've seen my parents, even just over the past few years, opening 2 Deviate locations, like seeing it go from 1 to 2 when they were literally able to double their efforts was so incredible. And I definitely don't think that their work is done. So I'm excited to see this domino effect kind of pick up and hopefully turn into a snowball effect where it keeps getting bigger and bigger. So I'm excited to watch it all unfold.
I bet you are. And, this has been such an awesome time today to really dive more into the story of DVA and the effect of addiction, the effect of relapsing, the domino effect, and the mental health aspect of it. We need you to come on again. We're going to have you on again, without a doubt. I'm so grateful for this opportunity again to have this very open, honest, and candid conversation. If anyone out there is listening, or perhaps if you view this later on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts, know that there is hope. There is a domino effect for you. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share Sam's story, continuing story about DBA. Of course, her parents in such a role model for Sam, and I'm so grateful. My gosh, these are the stories that inspire us. Sam, thank you so much for being here today.
Janice,
And
thank you for having me. This was great.
oh, it's been an amazing conversation. Hey, everyone, I just also wanted to pass this along to you. Of course, if you have a story that will inspire others and you don't know how to go about it, I, of course, would be happy to promote your story on Stories That Inspire Us. And of course, if you have a book, please feel free to go to my website, and everything will be updated with the show notes, and of course where you can contact Sam and purchase her book. And I know Sam will keep me posted on when her audio will be available. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. Continue to be amazed, inspired by this young lady, Sam Perez. Thanks again, Sam. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye for now.